Hi guys, welcome to Matt Chat. This is episode number 13, in which we cover Warren Robinette's Adventure for the Atari 2600. Warren Robinette's Adventure is an interesting game for many reasons. Probably what most people talk about is the Easter egg, which I'll get to in a moment. But I think there's a lot more interesting things about this game than just that. For one thing, its place in the timeline of video games. 1979, when this game was released, was a very early year in computer game history. The Atari 2600 had only been out for a few years, and we were just beginning to see the penetration of personal computers in people's homes. So still, 1979, having a computer in the home, having a console in the home, was very new and very exciting for a lot of people. That said, though, many of the games, especially on the Atari 2600, seemed very simplistic. We had games like Combat, and of course all the Pong games from earlier. And while fun, these games they didn't seem nearly as ambitious as the games that had people like Warren Robinette had played at college. Robinette had attended Berkeley, and he got a chance to play another game called Adventure, or more specifically Colossal Cave Adventure, a game released in the early 70s by William Crowther and then Don Woods, a programmer who found the code and expanded it. Now Colossal Cave Adventure is another very interesting and groundbreaking game, but it's all text. In fact, a lot of people, when they played this game, they didn't even have a monitor to display the text on. They had a printer, and the printer would print a description of a room, and then they had a keyboard, and they would enter what command they wanted, so go north or get lamp or what have you, and then this would go to the computer, and the printer would print out a response. So it sounds, incredibly primitive today, but at the same time, it was revolutionary for the people who got to experience it. Because the world of Colossal Cave was so immense. You had all of these rooms, all of these puzzles, all of these fun things to do and explore, and this notion of a quest. It was all very exciting stuff. But of course, Warren Robinette was not alone in wanting to adapt a game like Colossal Cave Adventure for the video game market, especially the console market. But it seemed like an impossible task. The Atari 2600, while a much-loved machine, people had a hard time imagining how you could ever have a game like Colossal Cave Adventure on a console that had no keyboard, very limited memory, very limited graphic technology, you name it, the limitation was there. But Robinette refused to be intimidated by this. He just saw it as a challenge that he wanted to take up, and he had a hard time convincing the folks at Atari that they should give this game a chance, give him a chance to see what he could come up with. And as we'll see, he found some very interesting ways to deal with the limitations of the technology. Some might say he actually turned those limitations into assets to make the game more fun. But overall, he was very successful. Adventure sold over 1 million copies. It's considered one of the best games for the system, certainly one of the most loved games among Atari fans, and well worth talking about and remembering today. So I hope you'll enjoy my coverage. Before we get into Adventure, though, a little about me. My name is Matt Barton. I am the author of Dungeons and Desktops, a book about computer role-playing games, and co-author of Vintage Games, a book that explores video game history from all eras and all platforms. If you're interested in game history, if you like retro gaming, classic gaming, and want to learn more about the roots of the gaming industry, or what have you, I would strongly suggest you check out those books. You can also visit us at armchairarcade.com, and hopefully everyone will at least rate this video. I'd really like it if you would comment on this video. I love reading your comments, and I almost always reply. Okay then, without further ado, let's play Adventure. Adventure was a very different kind of game than what most gamers were familiar with on their Atari 2600. The goal of the game is to find a magical chalice and find some way to get this chalice into the gold castle. That's going to require navigating a huge labyrinth, avoiding or dispatching a number of dragons,
using some basic puzzle solving to get around walls and a few other obstacles. Here I've already run into Grundle, the dragon, who decides to eat me. But thankfully there's not that huge of a consequence here. One nice thing about the game is if you reset, you can go straight back in. The doors you opened are still open and so on. So kind of a way of it's probably an exaggeration to call it a save game, but it is at least a way to continue the game without having to start completely from scratch every time. Now there are a number of objects that I'll need along the way. One is this thing this bat is carrying, which is a sword. And this bat, by the way, he flies around the dungeon and will randomly pick up objects. He seems to like to grab stuff out of your hands, especially if you've gone to a lot of trouble to get a key or something. This bat comes around and will grab it. Reminds me of the vulture in Pharaoh's Curse. But there are some things I can do. I can grab the bat and the objects still work even though I'm holding the bat and the object that he's holding. But anyway, there's a sword that I can use to kill the dragons. There are keys for each one of the castles. There's a gold key for the gold castle. There's a white castle. There's a black castle. So I'll need to find those. I can also use a bridge, which I'll show you in a moment, that will let you travel across walls. And there is a magnet that will let you attract objects that have gotten caught in a wall or in an inaccessible part of a maze. Now you've seen some parts of the maze here. I'm showing you the gold castle that I just opened. Some of the mazes are lit and some are dark. What I mean by that is here, for instance, you can only see the walls immediately around you. The idea seems to be that these are the areas that your torch or lamp would illuminate. So just to fast forward here a bit, I wanted to show you how this bridge works, which I think is a really neat feature. Basically what I have to do is pick it up and carry it to a spot. It needs to be a wall that I can go north or south across. And then it'll just let me skip right across that. It's very neat. It lets me access a few certain areas. So again, you know, it's a feature that's not necessarily graphically impressive, but very innovative and a nice way to use the Atari technologies. It's the sort of thing that's easy to overlook nowadays when developers or when games are developed by huge teams, million dollar budgets. There's not a lot of room, it seems, for these sort of small but nevertheless brilliant ideas that make a good game into a great game. Perhaps the most famous example of this is the famous Easter egg in this game. This takes a little explanation. Basically, Atari in the late 70s, it had been taken over by a guy named Ray Kassar, who was by all accounts something of a goon. He didn't want the programmers and developers, even ones as talented as Warren Robinette, he didn't want their names getting out there. He seemed to think that these guys, that anybody with an engineering background could come in and make great games. This was the reason why companies like Activision were founded. But anyway, what Warren decided to do was hide his name in the game, the same way a painter might hide his initials, or a sculptor might chisel his name. But he had to do it very covertly because his company, Atari, would undoubtedly have taken this code out. So he didn't tell anybody, not even his close friends at Atari, because he figured if he couldn't even keep the secret, then how could he expect anyone else to? I think it's also a moral lesson to publishers. Never underestimate the power of your programmers. These guys are very smart and they will find a way to subvert your policies. Now, if you'd like to play this game today, you have several options. One is to purchase a device like this, the Atari Flashback 2, which has Adventure and many other classic 2600 games on it. You can also play it for free in a web browser, which I'm showing here. Or there are all sorts of emulation options that you might want to explore, but which are more technical.
And that's all for this week's Matt Chat. Happy hunting!